I heard in the beginning it was an all guys camp, and later it was for kids from the city who really didn't have like experiences in the wilderness and stuff, so they brought them here camp. That's what I heard, for like troubled youths or something.
There were no girls.
Mostly boys.
It was all boys camp.
I think there were kids that were just exactly like us. I'm sure they all love sports.
What was it like? What were the guys like? Could they, without girls around?
Bored. So they probably had rabbis.
And they probably didn't have any bunks. They probably just had tents and like bad food.
I think I came in 1931.
You have to understand where I came from. It's a tenement on the Lower East Side. And the only natural growth I saw was a horse dropping his oats on a sidewalk and having it sprout between the cracks.
I arrived in Surprise Lake Camp in 1937 in the 5th grade.
It was June of 1943, June 9th, 1943, in fact, and that day, the worst day of my life, my father died suddenly of a heart attack. I was 9.5 years old, my brother was 6.5, my mother had nowhere to turn. 2 weeks later, her mother would die. She thought it would be a pretty good idea if her 2 boys could go somewhere that summer, at least get away from the city heat and all the pressures of the loss of a father. We had no money, and along came Surprise Lake Camp.
Myself and 4 friends attended camp in 1938, and would you believe at that time it was 2 weeks for $18.
To my recollection, I didn't have to pay because my parents couldn't afford it. And I remember going downtown with a suitcase. The whole family, we didn't have a suitcase, so I borrowed it from a relative to put my stuff in it.
We didn't know how poor we really were until we went to Surprise Lake Camp. When we got to Surprise Lake Camp, we had 3 squares a day. It was the first place that I'd ever had pancakes.
The first day I entered camp, I wrote a letter saying I want to go home. But then I had reservations. I didn't mail the letter, and I liked the camp.
The first thing was it was so open and so clean, and people smiled at me and people welcomed me. And we had, I think we were 52 other boys, all from the same circumstances I was.
When we came in by bus, the thing that amazed me was it was like we were on a rise, and here I saw this magnificent looking lake surrounded by, to me, mountains, actually just hills. And then I realized as a kid, that's probably why they call it Surprise Lake Camp, because it's surprised that there is a lake hidden up here.
I met alumni who came to camp as children in the 20s or 30s, and the country was so new to them. Stories of kids getting off the bus, looking at the fields and saying, "Where are the streets to play ball?"
As a teen, Neil spent his summers far away from the hustle and bustle of Brooklyn. 90 miles north of the city, Surprise Lake Camp opened up Neil's eyes and ears to new possibilities.
At Surprise Lake, I was exposed to a lot of music. It kind of inspired me to take guitar lessons and learn how to play.
Everything that I ever learned about athletics, I learned at Surprise Lake Camp, making lanyards. It was the first time I ever took a hike. First time I ever roasted marshmallows at a campfire. It was a first of a lot of things in my life that I will never forget.
It was the first time I ever went away from home. And when I wanted to chase lizards or chameleons, they wanted me to go swimming. But I chased lizards and chameleons.
Every morning before breakfast, we dressed up warm and took a 1/4 mile walk through this country road to the well and drank the most delicious pure water.
Being able to row to the end of the lake, pull in my oars, and look up at the sky and the surroundings.
I think what it did is gave you an idea of what life could be one day. You know, all you got to do is get a taste of something sometimes in this life, of something that's good and beautiful, and it lasts forever.
Surprise Lake Camp was a, quote, charity camp, and there was no middle-class clientele for agencies that were superior in many ways to the parallel agencies in our community. So it was, you know, when you friends asked you, what are you doing with your children? And I said, I took them up to Surprise Lake Camp this summer. My grandchildren at campus there. They found that hard to believe.
I met kids that came from backgrounds that were so totally different than mine. I wasn't aware of the fact that there were people that didn't have fathers, who worked in gas stations and drove taxi cabs, whose kids went to Surprise Lake. I didn't know any kids like that because I grew up in an upper middle class neighborhood. And I found out that those kids were terrific people, and I stayed in touch with a lot of them.
The funniest part of living was the phony initiation rites we had after dinner around the campfire. We'd get a newcomer, ask him all kinds of dopey questions, have him stripped to the waist, and then we'd print something obscene on his back with iodine. Very funny.
The best time was the evening. We all got together after dinner. They had the radio in the dining room, and we heard Jack Armstrong, and we heard Eddie Cantor come on.
Ida, sweet as apple cider.
My grandfather was kind of a truant, wasn't doing too well on the Lower East Side of Manhattan in around 1903, I would say.
Eddie Cantor was probably the most famous performer of his era, and he got his start at Surprise Lake Camp.
I think one of his bunkmates was Walter Winchell, and another one was, I think, George Sokolsky. And yes, it did turn his life around, but not just in taking him off the street and away from the juvenile delinquent element that he was with most of the time, but he learned, as he said, the power of show business.
I was sent out to a summer camp, Cold Springs, New York, and oh, that first day in camp, a swimming pool. We could take a swim and we didn't have to wait until Saturday night. And oh, the green. Never saw such a stretch of green outside of a pool table. And the first day in camp, on the bulletin board, there was a sign which said, if you can entertain, sign your name here. And this ham with the big eyes was the first one online.
Well, I know that there wasn't an Eddie Cantor Theater when he was first went there, that it was all, this is something that I think my grandfather was absolutely thrilled about. That I think it started in 1955. I think the camp basically turned his life around, and he never forgot it. And he knew that as soon as he became successful, that he wanted to continue to support the camp and make sure that other kids had the same opportunity that he did.
I give him all the credit that what he's done for the camp, to support the camp. Of course, if it's not for Eddie Cantor, Surprise Lake Camp wouldn't be there.
Another reason for making whoopee.
I think that the facilities for sure have changed, especially like the basketball courts. At that time, I don't even think they had the three-point line.
They probably didn't have Gaga or climbing tower. Instead of having like cars with wheels that turn by themselves, they would have ponies pulling cars.
A lot of the bunks may have changed. They may have been rearranged. To the looks of it, maybe looks like they haven't changed. I can't imagine living like in a bunk without electricity.
You probably didn't have the diving dock,
kayaks,
the canoes. It was black and white.
At that time, it was all boys. The bunks were 4 to a bunk, all open-sided.
The beds were about 2 inches away, so you knew everybody who was near you.
They had no bathrooms, that had canvas sidings that you used to drop down at night when it got cold or when it was rain. And we all walked to a shower place and a place to go to the bathroom. It was pretty primitive.
I remember the peacefulness of listening to the rain hitting the ceiling of the tent, being able to look out and to see the rain, but to feel very safe. And that sense of safety and calm has always lasted with me.
I had never heard of Surprise Lake Camp until I started living here 52 years ago. The very first summer I was here, some children were hiking and they come to me and say, do you know how to get to Surprise Lake Camp? And I didn't really know. They said, well, it's right next to the mountain in Cold Spring. I said, well, Cold Spring is 3 miles away in their side of the mountain. I'm on the west side. You must be on the east side. Oh, they said, can we use your telephone? And I'd just gotten a telephone in. And they called up, can you send a bus for us or a truck or something? We won't be able to get back for supper.
Some of us thought we heard drums and bugles from West Point because they were looking for us.
The 3 o'clock in the morning hike was very important because that prepared me for the police department. We were in the darkness and I expected a snake to leap up at any moment. It was such a thrill when we saw the sunrise and we were on the big rocks and we had our lunch and feast. We patted each other on the back. That was real character building and that was pulling together.
The only time we went off campus is when Harry Vogel put us into his Jeep. It was some of the scariest trips in my life were driving in Harry's Jeep.
But some of the greatest memories of my life come in here. It's probably where I had my first girlfriend.
It was a lot of fun. It was a time for discovery.
I remember every year being the most depressing day of my life was the day we had to go home every year.
That's right. Just looking back on it, I think just being dropped off and left at camp with a bunch of strangers at the time, and then coming through the session and then being your best friends, I think that was probably the best memory I've had.
The thing that I most remember is the warmth that was shown to me by the directors. They had total understanding of the problems that kids like me had.
This woman was about 4 feet 4 tall. She was the smallest woman in the world, but she was the biggest woman in the world as far as we were concerned. She was our camp mother and we loved her.
That summer was life transforming for me. It was the first time that I really saw Israeli dancing and singing. Friday night, all the kids dressed in white would go to the Eddie Cantor Playhouse and they'd have bring in the Sabbath.
That was an important, integral part of my deciding to become a rabbi.
They know how to bring it into the 21st century and keep it current and keep it modern, yet keep the traditions.
Nothing has changed. It's frozen in time.
When I first got the job, I called Asher Melzer, who had been the camp director when I was a camper. And I said, Asher, have you heard? I'm going to be the new director of Surprise Lake Camp. And he went on for about 20 minutes in the way only Asher could, and basically gave me a speech about how Surprise Lake Camp is not just a camp, it's an institution. Having done the job now for about 15 years, every year I get a new and better understanding of just how true that is.
Nestled beneath the shady trees.
It's a place where things are always changing, and yet the most essential elements remain the same. The camp's natural surroundings, the spirit of the camp, the traditions, the sense of helping people come to camp who otherwise couldn't afford to come, the way that children come here maybe a little bit afraid at first, but they leave this camp having grown up as people. Those things are constant.
It changed my whole life. I was a shy little fat kid, and by the end of the summer, I was into archery and baseball and all that.
Surprise Lake Camp gave me the impetus to do things which I probably would never have done.
Without Surprise Lake Camp, I would have probably not survived physically, but certainly not mentally, and certainly not to become a success in life.
I think it's really cool that a lot of celebrities like Jerry Stiller came here, and I don't know, it makes this camp feel special.
It feels cool, I guess, because you're part of a legend.
It makes me feel special, like I'm in some place that's so historical. Where I'm standing, someone from maybe 100 years ago was standing, a kid my age. I saw in a bunk my mom's name and my uncle's name written on the wall, and it was weird because thinking my mom and my uncle came here when they were kids, and I couldn't imagine that.
Camp was like Brigadoon to me. It would sort of appear every summer, and I had this idealistic, wonderful, wonderful time.
Surprise Lake Camp is probably, outside of marriage, the finest experience I ever had. I spent my 5 best years of my life there. It is where we met. It was a part of us. It always will be.
I told my grandchildren who attended summer camp the last couple of years to cherish every trip that you go to, because you're only young once, and all these memories you're going to have, and all the young kids you're going to meet will always be lifetime friends.
Even if you remember just a little bit
about the camp. It'll always bring back tears to your eyes thinking about it.
Oh, to be a kid again. Make the most of it.
That's the big part of camp, the lifetime friends that you make. And that's what also helps to keep this thing going. When I'm not here anymore, it will go on forever.
This is a product of Surprise Lake Camp, right here.
It's true.
This place is about generations, one generation after another, returning and returning to the camp.
The fact that I could have my children feeling the same exact thing that I felt when I was younger is a wonderful thing.
If there's anything that was a really strong tie, it was this positive feeling we had for camp. And
it was a gift that our grandfather gave to us, that he gave to our father, and that he was then able to pass down to us.
And it's something we truly feel is a gift.
My service for Surprise Lake is extremely important to me because it is one of a relatively small number of things that I can sort of say is part of a powerful family tradition. And it's a tradition from my grandfather to my mother to me. How you doing?
You can't go very far without meeting somebody who in some way went to Surprise Lake, whether they themselves went or their parents went or their children went. It's such an extraordinary part of the community of certainly the greater New York area, but now I think pretty well nationally, if not internationally.
The children that we served are sending their children to camp, and I'd say to all who have been staff at camp, this is a real tribute to the job that you've all done.
I'm proud. I'm so proud to be a camper at SLC, and I'll be proud to send my kids there.
If it can live through 100 summers and have such an impeccable record and still be there for me to attend, for my sister to attend, for all of us to attend, then it's definitely something else.
I came in from Houston, Texas to see these guys. I haven't seen them in 45 years.
I'd like to welcome you all to the 100th anniversary gala dinner in honor of Surprise Lake Camp. It's my pleasure to announce tonight that we have raised so far, we still have some gifts out, $1,013,000 for Surprise Lake Camp Scholarship Fund.
Jewish camps change Jewish lives, and so many here were changed by their summer at Surprise Lake.
When we honor SLC, the institution, we honor every one of you in this room and the thousands who came before you, whose love, whose generosity, and whose spirit has made Surprise Lake Camp great.
Thank you and shalom.
I love that place, and that's it. I love it.
And another 100 years, maybe my kids will be counselors. You never know.
Oh, God help us all.
We love you all, buddy. We love SLC.
Harry Vogel Aquatic Fund, established July 2002, in honor of Harry Vogel's 50 years at Surprise Lake Camp.
Ponce de Leon spent his whole life searching for the fountain of youth. Harry was keeping it a secret, the water in the lake.
This has been one glorious day for Surprise Lake Camp.
It gives us a chance to reflect on how enduring the institution has been. 100 years would be impressive for this camp just because there aren't a lot of camps that old today.